Arc'teryx built one of the most desired jackets on Earth. It didn't get there by chasing trends or redesigning for hype. It ignored the fashion calendar entirely and never relied on glossy ad campaigns. Just a shell engineered for life or death situations that now sells out in city streets. Arc'teryx didn't start in Paris or Milan. It began in a damp workshop in North Vancouver, where a handful of climbers were sewing gear that might save their lives. Today, under CEO Stuart Hazelden, the company is redefining what premium means, doubling down on direct-to-consumer retail, elevating technical performance, and building loyalty through simple but powerful touchpoints like repairs that turn customers into lifelong advocates. In this episode, you'll see the playbook for creating desirability without the usual luxury formula, and how mountain discipline became one of the most profitable and imitated strategies in modern retail. In 1989, at the base of North Vancouver's rugged coastal mountains, a small team of climbers set out to solve a problem no one else was addressing. They weren't chasing storefront presence or crafting a lifestyle image. They needed gear that would keep them alive on punishing rock faces and frozen summits. That's how Rock Solid Manufacturing began, a harness maker founded by climbers who lived their sport daily, where a gear failure wasn't just inconvenient, it could be fatal. From the start, performance wasn't a selling point, it was the only point. Inside Rock Solid, the culture felt more like a workshop than a business. The founders split their time between sewing tables and vertical walls, testing every prototype in the environments it was designed for. Instead of designing for catalog appeal, they started with the demands of the terrain, stripping away anything that didn't directly improve safety or endurance. While other outdoor brands of the early 90s were shifting toward casual wear for broader audiences, they stayed focused on serving committed climbers, accepting slower initial sales in exchange for technical credibility. By 1991, the team rebranded as Arc'teryx, a name referencing Archaeopteryx, one of the first creatures to develop feathers for flight. It symbolized a leap forward in evolution, mirroring the company's belief in transforming complexity into precise function. The fossil skeleton logo was a deliberate signal: progress through innovation, mastery through detail. That principle showed up in their early breakthroughs, from thermo-molded waist straps on backpacks to pioneering waterproof zippers and helmet-compatible storm hoods. These incremental but practical advances built a reputation that wasn't based on marketing. It was earned in the field. Innovation began with climbing harnesses, where comfort and durability dictated safety on long ascents. The Vapor harness introduced lighter materials and shape molding that reduced pressure points and distributed weight more evenly. For climbers spending hours suspended between bolts, it wasn't flashy innovation. It was a fundamental upgrade to how they worked and endured on the wall. Tackling one essential piece of gear at a time and re-engineering it without compromise became the company's signature approach. Their headquarters sits in the shadow of the coastal mountains, a natural laboratory for wet, windy, and icy testing. Prototypes weren't confined to lab benches. They were exposed to conditions that punished every weakness. This environment bred an R&D culture where changes were slow but significant, often requiring months or years of field testing before a product update made it to market. In the mid-1990s, Arc'teryx began working with Gore-Tex, a partnership that culminated in the 1998 debut of the Alpha SV. Engineered for alpinists, not for fashion, it married weatherproofing, breathability, and durability at a level that outperformed anything available. The Alpha SV didn't just enter the market, it reset the standards for alpine shells worldwide. Serious climbers and skiers spread the word long before the jackets found their way into broader awareness. Opportunities to grow quickly were there. Other companies in the same position chased trend-driven fabrics, softened technical lines, and reshaped messaging to appeal to urban buyers. Arc'teryx resisted? They designed for conditions, not for lookbooks, and kept communication grounded in the materials and engineering behind each piece. If a modification didn't improve performance, it didn't get approved. That discipline is why customers today still talk about trusting the gear as fiercely as they did when they bought their first jacket or harness decades ago. What those original climbers didn't anticipate was that their extreme performance standards and pared-back design language would resonate far beyond the alpine community. The same uncompromising shells that protected mountaineers in storm-bound bivouacs started appearing in urban settings, worn by people who valued their precision and restraint for entirely different reasons. And while this shift wasn't by design, it set the stage for an entirely new chapter, one where the brand's technical DNA would collide with a cultural moment no one in that small North Vancouver workshop had imagined. Imagine becoming one of the most recognizable shapes in streetwear without ever planning for it. Arc'teryx found itself there, suddenly visible in a cultural shift that blended high-performance outerwear with the visual language of fashion, music, and tech. Jackets that once belonged on granite walls in hard rain were now spotted in subway stations, on red carpets, and layered into runway looks. They weren't worn over thermal base layers after a summit. They were thrown over hoodies, paired with sneakers, and folded into urban wardrobes. This crossover gathered pace as Gorpcore entered style conversations, a trend built on outdoor performance gear reframed as street fashion. Unlike some competitors who launched lifestyle lines to chase it, Arc'teryx kept its technical products at the center. It did run Valence, a deliberate urban technical arm, and chose collaborations selectively. The fashion audience wasn't fed seasonal style capsules, it inherited the alpine-ready pieces the brand was already making. The shift wasn't driven by ad campaigns. It happened in moments people noticed. Seen on Frank Ocean, on Drake, and glimpsed in Virgil Abloh's runway moments, the jackets transitioned from niche to cultural symbol. These were organic sightings and runway uses, not paid influencer campaigns. Why did it click? Minimal logo, technical performance as visible proof, controlled distribution that preserved desirability. The brand's small fossil mark, clean cuts, and seam tape precision signaled something different from both streetwear logos and heritage outdoor looks. Those who knew, and those who didn't often still registered that this was something built to last. For some in tech and creative industries, the appeal was deeply functional. A shell could keep you dry on a bike commute, breathe indoors, and look appropriate in a meeting. The durability and longevity meant fewer replacements over time, aligning with values of efficiency and utility. Here, form and function reinforced each other instead of competing. Scarcity played a role too. Arc'teryx maintained tight control over production runs and retailer selection, balancing accessibility with the sense that finding one was an achievement. The scarcity wasn't created through hype drops. It was the outcome of a manufacturing philosophy tuned to precision, not volume. Even in collaborations, the brand kept its stance. When Arc'teryx does collabs, they're picky and technical first. Palace and Jill Sander were curated and built around performance materials, not purely hype. Work with beams might bring in subtle detailing, but the weatherproofing, seam sealing, and construction were always the primary story. These partnerships added another dimension, but never diluted the original premise. That left a strategic balancing act, maintaining authenticity for the core user while becoming a status item in the city. Chasing trend cycles risked losing hard-earned credibility with climbers and backcountry skiers. Ignoring the streetwear wave risked missing a whole generation of new customers. Arc'teryx found its middle path: stay the course on design, let the market discover you, and allow cross-cultural relevance to grow from consistency, not reinvention. The result was a rare position in modern retail, a brand embraced in fashion circles without surrendering its technical integrity. The outdoor purists still trusted the gear because it hadn't changed for them. The urban adopters valued it precisely because it hadn't been adapted to court them. The street credibility came as a side effect of the very focus that built the mountain credibility in the first place. And while celebrity sightings and runway flashes helped shape its image, the next stage of growth would hinge less on cultural moments and more on how people experienced the brand firsthand. Moments where trust could be built without a single ad. While competitors fight for attention with expensive campaigns, Arc'teryx earns loyalty in moments that happen on the sales floor or at a service counter. The key isn't persuasion, it's connection. When a customer handles the product, tests the fit, and understands its purpose, the brand's value becomes self-evident. This is why Arc'teryx has invested heavily in direct-to-consumer retail. Under Hazelden, the company doubled down on its DTC strategy, opening dozens of branded locations, including 33 net new stores in 2024, built as hands-on learning centers rather than traditional retail spaces. In these stores, sales targets take a back seat to deeper conversations. Staff don't start by pointing out features or pushing the latest drop. They begin by asking, "What will you use this for?" The conversation evolves from the customer's activity, a multi-day ice climb, a wet season bike commute, or a touring trip deep in the backcountry. From there, every layer, zipper, and seam is explained in the context of function. The focus is product education, not pressure, because an informed customer is far more likely to come back. A central part of this loyalty engine is Rebird, Arc'teryx's circularity program, which reinforces the brand's technical credibility while deepening the customer relationship. Rebird operates across 3 pillars. ReCare covers gear washing and repair, everything from re-waterproofing a shell to replacing a failed zipper. ReGear manages trade-ins and resale, giving refurbished products a second life and opening access to new customers at lower price points. Recut takes material from damaged gear and upcycles it into limited runs of functional items. Across all 3, the principle is the same: keep well-designed gear in use as long as possible. And these efforts aren't symbolic. In 2023, Rebird crossed 20,000 repairs, and it has expanded into dozens of service locations worldwide. Each repair isn't just a saved jacket, it's a touch point that strengthens the bond between customer and brand. Here's how that looks in practice. A customer brings in a decade-old Alpha SV that's beginning to fray at the cuff. Instead of steering them toward a newer model, the store team repairs, reseals, and restores the jacket to near original function. That shell goes back into use, and the customer leaves as an advocate in the wild, a walking endorsement that the brand stands by its gear for the long haul. On the surface, repairs might seem to slow the replacement cycle. In reality, they're a strategic play. By maintaining exceptional performance over years, Arc'teryx builds trust that often leads to complementary purchases. Insulation layers, pants, gloves, pieces that integrate with gear already owned. Repairs nurture repeat interaction, creating relationship depth and lifetime value potential far beyond what one-off sales deliver. This loyalty framework translates globally. In China, for example, Arc'teryx has grown rapidly in major urban centers, where the logo signals both technical mastery and refined taste. Repair and resale offerings add to that appeal, signaling that the gear is engineered for years, not just seasons. In markets where trust and proof of quality drive purchasing habits, these programs become clear differentiators. Arc'teryx extends this experience beyond the store walls. Whether it's guiding a customer through mountain layering systems, servicing gear after hard use, or selling a refurbished piece with its own story, each touch point reinforces the idea that buying Arc'teryx isn't a transaction, it's joining an ecosystem designed to keep you equipped for the long run. The effect is a brand that doesn't have to rely on the churn of seasonal fashion or high-spend advertising to keep customers engaged. Instead, it compounds trust event by event, service by service, year after year. For those who buy in, the value proposition grows with every trip into the mountains, or simply every year that a jacket refuses to fail. It's an approach that redefines what premium can mean in retail. setting the stage for a bigger question about the value the customer is paying for. Arc'teryx isn't luxury in the traditional sense. You're not paying for a logo or a season. You're paying for engineering that outlasts trends, field-tested durability, and lifetime care. Few brands design with the goal of keeping products in use for decades. Arc'teryx does. And in a world built on planned obsolescence, that's not just rare, it's radical. If you were running a brand, would you have the discipline to play the long game? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you want more deep dives into the hidden strategies behind the world's most fascinating brands, hit subscribe. The next story might just change how you see your favorite jacket.